Welcome into the Need for Screens College Football Podcast presented by the pregame.com podcast network. I'm your host, G Warner, joined by at Big East Ben. And we are coming off a white hot, green hot. I'm not even sure. All I know is that all the colors on our screen were green. Everything on the graphic that at Big East Ben puts out was green. At Big East Ben, how are you doing on this beautiful 1st of October?
I'm doing great, Mr. Perfect, as I am also Mr. Perfect.
Great, Mr. Perfect.
It was a magical week. We each went 5-0. We gave out 8 unique winning tickets. And if you count my honorable mention best bets, UNLV, BYU, and Colorado, we technically went 11-0. Not sure if anyone strung those together. Uh, but Griffin, what was so magical about it was relatively sweat free. You had Kansas State -5, won by a billion. I had the over. You had Notre Dame and Notre Dame Loserville.
Mm.
Notre Dame technically only covered by 1 point, but that was a late touchdown by Louisville that was meaningless. I mean, your biggest sweat had to be Georgia Alabama
Mm.
when Georgia had the ball back to possibly send the game to overtime. You're still good when they took the lead there. Illinois, Penn State, low scoring. Illinois hung tough. And then once I saw Isaac Wilson, the brother of Zach Wilson, was starting for Utah against Arizona, I knew the under was a lock on that one. So just smooth sailing and ready to do it again.
Yeah, smooth sailing. 11-0 reminds me of a 11-0 best bet run on the Need for Seeds college basketball podcast done by at Big East Ben. We're still looking for the UConn. I gotta say, Illinois unders might be my UConn this season, but we'll see how that goes moving forward. We have 5 games to go through on this, plus best bets coming end of show. Trying to just keep on going, keep on trucking, row the boat, if you will. And we're gonna do as best we can. Do you have anything else you'd like to get off your chest at Big East Ben before we get into this week 6 card?
Gonzaga's going to the Pac-12, but that's for a different podcast.
Yes, more to come, and hopefully some good news more to come as well. Because I know everyone's been enjoying us. Please make sure you subscribe if you're on Apple Podcast, Spotify. Leave 5-star reviews wherever you're listening to this podcast. Subscribe on YouTube. Do everything you can. We appreciate the support, and it's been helping us, and it's been helping pregame.com as well. And we'll be hoping to stick around as long as possible. We'll start on Friday with the Syracuse Orange, not Orange Men. We've moved past those days. The Orange Persons from Syracuse, they're visiting UNLV, a 6.5 point underdog right now. Total is 58.5.
So no Sluka, no problem for the Rebels. They kicked that greedy a-hole from Worcester, Massachusetts to the curb and brought in Haj Malik Williams, who looks like he is probably better. UNLV has been a monster this year. I also like what he said. He told the guy at Circa, instead of giving the 100K to Sluka, just give it to the offensive line. I like that comment as well. So you can tell this team has just moved on from Mr. Sluka and are just making their push towards the college football playoff. 4-0 against the spread this year with wins over pretty quality opponents in Houston, Kansas, and most recently Fresno State, that drubbing. Listen, Syracuse has been solid. They got Kyle McCord, the former Ohio State transfer, under center. They air it out. They're number 3 in the country in passing yards per game. They had the one slip up against Stanford, but otherwise a pretty unblemished record. This game's going to be this is contrasting styles. I mean, UNLV is 20th in the country in rushing the ball. Syracuse third in the country in throwing the ball. Syracuse rush defense is pretty suspect. They're 94th in the country in rush D. And while UNLV is 74th in the country in pass D, they do have a pretty veteran secondary. 3 out of 4 starters are returning, so I expect them to improve. And UNLV can get to the quarterback. I mean, they're 10th in the country in sack percentage. So they're going to make McCord uncomfortable. I think they're going to be able to hold them in check. I think they're going to keep on running. I will take them laying the points.
All right, so that's a UNLV -6.5 for the second most greedy asshole from Worcester, Massachusetts. I'll go with over 58.5 in this one. I don't know necessarily that a running big favorite is I guess 6.5 is not huge in college football, but to me, I feel like Syracuse and a high passing offense, they're going to try to keep up and try to score as many points as they can. Maybe they're able to get in the back door late with some points, not necessarily to cover the spread because I'm looking for our all green perfect podcast to continue, but I'll go over 58.5. Big East Ben is taking UNLV minus 6.5. We'll move to Saturday with a big matchup in the SEC where it just means more. The Missouri Tigers visit Texas A&M at College Station for what should be a really just a beautiful weekend of sights and scenery in CStat. Right now we have A&M laying 2 points, totals 48.5.
So Missouri top 20 in both offense and defense. They haven't really shown it this year though. They kind of squeaked by two middling teams in Boston College and our alma mater Vanderbilt. I think they should have lost that game versus Vanderbilt, but our kicker missed a 48-yarder to win the game and went into overtime, and they ended up pulling it out.
Go Doors.
So go Doors. So a very hyped team, but has not played up to expectations. Similar to the team across the field from them, Texas A&M, dismal 1-4 against the spread. They have won their last four after dropping the opener against Notre Dame. Missouri is a very balanced team. They spread it equally between the pass and run, and they're great at both. Texas A&M is not. Their quarterback play is dismal. They rely heavily on the run, rushing about 60% of plays a game, but they're not that good at it. They're only 45th in the country in yards per run. Missouri has a stout rush defense. They're balanced on offense. Yes, it is scary going into Kyle Field, but one team this year has already proved that that's not a big deal. I do personally, and I'll wait for your answer, but I feel like this is where the all green board chances of happening again dies because I'm going to go with Missouri in this one.
All right, the Mizzou Tigers, Mizzou, rah, 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 whatever you say at the end. All right, so at Big East Ben's going Missouri +2. I still don't feel great about A&M. I mean, the loss to Notre Dame, I guess we should let that go. But to me, it feels like a very similar scenario here. As you would eventually hear on the Need for Seeds college basketball podcast with @the real _G Warner and @Big East Ben. I think I might just be betting home favorites, short home favorites all season. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I believe enough in Texas A&M at this point. Mizzou has been impressive to me, despite at least coming into the year with expectations and maybe haven't lived up to those yet. At Big East Ben, we'll take Missouri +2. I'll grab under 48.5 because I do feel like even if Texas A&M is able to win this game, it's going to be a low-scoring shit fest, if you use my French. We'll move next to Ole Miss at USC. And this is the USC, the Eastern version. Thank you for, I guess you didn't put a U in there when you sent this over to me of what to pick. But Mississippi currently a 9.5-point favorite on the road in Columbia. South Carolina totals 53.5 right now. So Ole Miss minus 9.5, total 53.5.
Tough break for the Rebs. Tough break for Lane Kiffin. Got shocked at home versus Kentucky, losing 20-17. This is the same Kentucky team that South Carolina whomped in Lexington 31-6 earlier in the season. Kind of contrasting styles on offense. Ole Miss, leaves the ball in the hands of their quarterback, Jackson Dart, most of the time, while South Carolina likes to pound the rock a little bit more. Ole Miss rushing defense has been elite. You want to take a guess on what they're allowing on rushing yards per play?
I'll go 2.7 yards.
Almost half, 1.5, which is second in the country.
Wow.
South Carolina, they rely on their.
Must have been all those Kentucky kneels that really set them back.
Yeah. South Carolina's given up. Their defense style is really about limiting the pass play. They're ninth in the country, only giving up 5.1 yards per play. So here's the deal. I don't know how Lane Kiffin, he's 3-2 against the spread coming after a loss. He seems like a really bad guy to piss off. But again, this spread is way too high. But Ole Miss is explosive. I really want to go with South Carolina, but I'm going to go with the under 53.5. Again, both of these teams cancel out what each other does best. I think this is this number is based more on these teams' reputations, but versus what they actually can do versus one another.
Okay, so at Big East Ben is going South Carolina plus 9.5.
Nope,
Probably.
I'm going under 53.5.
Okay, thank you for that correction. At Big East Ben is going with Ole Miss, South Carolina, under 53.5. What I just did was I foreshadowed where I'm going with this one. I am curious and a little bit tempted by a plus 270 money line right now, but I'll take the 9.5 points. I think it correlates well, home team, low scoring game that I think favors the better rushing offense. We'll see how that works against an Ole Miss stout rushing defense, but Jackson Dart I've never really been in love with. Lane Kiffin I do like, but I feel like there is a level that he can get to. And I think Ole Miss coming off a loss is going to be a great position for them to bounce back. But I think it's a lot of points, as you mentioned here. And there's a pretty big window for a backdoor opportunity, nearly getting 10 points, 9.5 as we speak. And we might get to 10 before kickoff. I'll move next to Michigan at Washington, if I can find this on the list. A nice, pretty romantic rematch from a pretty big game last season that I was hoping my Texas Longhorns would be in. But Michael Penix happened, or as we were calling him, Michael Penix the whole night. And then it was less funny when he literally dropped that Penix all over us. But Michigan, a 2.5 point underdog on the road at Washington. Total is 41.5 in this one.
So this game actually opened up Michigan favored by 1.5, and the sharp action flipped it. So something to be aware of there. Michigan, they have responded well they've won 3 in a row after their drubbing versus Texas, but those 3 wins were by a combined 16 points. They really should have blown the doors off Minnesota, let them creep back into that game. Only 3-point win. Wisconsin, meanwhile, is coming off.
Washington
is coming off a loss in their Big Ten opener against Rutgers and Piscataway, despite putting up 5. What?
I'm sorry, just play with Washington against Rutgers in a conference game just blows my mind. Apologies. Yeah. I mean, it was a long travel all the way to Pullman, Washington for UW. But here's this. Try to go to East Rutherford, New Brunswick or whatever the heck, somewhere out in Staten Island, New York, for the State University of New Jersey. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
But one of my favorite tweets from last weekend was this Oregon account being like, oh, they said the Big Ten was going to be too physical for us. They said it's a different style of play. Well, who's talking now? And it was responding to the Oregon score against UCLA.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, Big Ten football, Washington at Rutgers. But so this all comes down to if Washington can, 1, stop the run, and 2, take care of the balls where Michigan doesn't get any cheap points like they did against USC. Yep. They're only 40th in the country in rushing defense, but they got a guy by the name of Belichick coaching them up. Steve, that is, who might be a huge dummy. I used to work with a guy who was in the same conference as Steve Belichick in high school, and every single time they played Steve Belichick's school in lacrosse, Steve Belichick was suspended for weed. So he might be a big dummy, stoner dummy. Also, those facial tongue stuff is off. But anyway, I believe in him. And 2, Washington takes care of the football. They have turned the ball over twice this season. Their quarterback, Will Rogers, has 0 interceptions. There is not going to be any cheap points for Michigan to have. The tailgate scene in Seattle is awesome. That crowd's going to be ready to go. I like the Huskies.
There's so many ways to analyze that one. So the tailgate scene in Seattle, I know I got super drunk and more than that, unfortunately.
Sailgating.
sailgating, right, at a Seattle Mariners event. But I guess in what's one thing leads to another out there in Washington. Long way to travel from Michigan. I'm going to join you with Washington -2.5, not just because Steve Belichick taught actually my roommate's little brother how to beat drug tests at the State University of New Jersey, but I think that just might be a theme on this podcast. I'm not even ever, did I even tell you that story before? It's funny how that all kind of overlaps. I guess what you can take away from this
We
podcast,
got time.
besides us going in like an incredible run and having an all green graphic from last week that I forgot to retweet, or I think I might have retweeted on my podcast feed instead of my actual at the real underscore G Warner. But regardless, that's going to happen sooner rather than later. With that said, Steve Belichick really maybe not great at defense, but he got friends in high places or dads in high places. And I think this is going to be a really tough situation. We've seen the number, as you say, already flip. That makes me want to back that home favorite. And I'll go with Washington -2.5 as our first simultaneous best bet on this week 6 episode. Last on our list is Miami, Florida, visiting California for a very wild ACC matchup, which will have Thug U on the road at the, I guess it's the Vaccination Nation or something like that. I'm not really sure what they're calling themselves now.
Woke versus Coke. Woke versus Coke. Woke
Coke,
versus Coke.
Coke versus Coke, the cola. Miami, a 10.5 point favor on the road at Cal. Over under is 55 in this one.
I also saw communists versus convicts. That was another good one for this game.
Instead of Catholics versus convicts. Yes, yes. From
Yeah.
Notre
Yeah.
Dame, Miami back in the day. I respect that.
Cal Twitter, the Calgorithm. You guys have been my favorite thing this year, tweeting out all your woke liberal AI pictures. Keep up the great work. I die every single time I see one. Miami won a thriller, possibly. It was maybe the game of the year for 12 hours until Alabama and Georgia kicked off. But that game against Virginia Tech with the almost Golden Tate-esque Monday Night Football finish. That was that like 2013 that happened?
Before or after he slept with Russell Wilson's wife?
That was before.
Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
before.
Must have been a celebration right afterwards. That's where it all happened.
Cal coming off a bye this week. They did lose against Tallahassee, which kind of slowed the Calgorithm a little momentum there. Miami, fourth best offense in the country. Cal, not so much. They're only averaging 20 points a game. Cal also defensively, they're more stout against the run than the pass, which Miami excels in. They're averaging like 11 yards per pass play, something crazy like that. Cam Ward's legit. Cam Ward knows this Cal defense is basically the same Cal defense that he torched for 39 points last year with Washington State like weapons. Imagine what he's going to do with Miami weapons. I know this is a long flight. I know college game day is going to be in Berkeley. I don't care. I'm going Miami. They run away with this one.
I'll go over 55 in this matchup, as I think we see points in this one. Maybe Miami gets off to a slow start being so far away from home, or maybe they start off really hot and kind of fade a little bit late with a big lead and let Cal get back into the game. I think we see a lot of points here. Late starts, I would highly recommend, since this is the second to last game on Saturday night's card, if you are trying to end the day on a winning note, please get over 55 bet in sooner rather than later, because this number is probably going to jump through all the chasers and things like that coming, as well as I think unders or something you bet at kickoff versus an over. It would certainly worry me if it went the other way on Saturday evening, but we'll see. So Big East Ben will give you Miami, Florida -10.5 on the road at Cal. I'll go over 55 in that matchup. Before we get any further, I do have a promo code to save $15 off anything on the pregame.com website. Only for listeners of this college football podcast, the Need for Screens College Football, presented by the pregame.com podcast network. $15 off anything. Use the promo code CFB15. CFB Charlie Frank Boy 15. Good for 7 days from this podcast release. Save $15 on anything on the pregame.com website. And at Big East Ben, it's time for you to give us your best bet on this week 6 episode as we try to make it 2 straight green graphics in a row.
So again, I like to usually give a game off the card as my best bet, but I did not through that last week, and it worked out pretty well. So I'm going to do, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm going with UNLV -6.5. This team is thriving. They have a better quarterback. They are making a playoff push. I loved them last year. I love their basketball team last year, and I may like this team the most out of all three. So go give me UNLV -6.5 against Syracuse.
So that's UNLV -6.5. Pulling on some basketball players in the crowd type of vibes, hopefully, on this big Friday evening sporting event. Maybe Jim Boeheim will be there for old kicks alongside Jerry Tarkanian.
Ooh, Jim Boeheim driving in Vegas. That'd be dangerous.
Yeah. Sorry to that construction worker's family, and really sorry for anyone that had to deal with Jimmy B for a very, very long time, including his actual own staff that he refused to say he was retiring until they basically had one of the most interesting retiring resignations / the season's over. He's like, well, I'm not quitting. Well, are you going to work next year? We're not sure. But that's for the Need for Seeds college basketball podcast coming up in about a month. We got the season starting really soon. So look forward to that. College basketball stuff coming out potentially on this feed. We'll see. We'll move
Shout
now.
out Judy.
What?
Judy Boeheim.
Judy Boeheim?
Julie Boeheim?
I think it's Julie, but
Julie.
I don't know much about her. All I know is Lupe didn't respond to my the letter that I wrote to Tom Izzo inviting them to have dinner with me in New York City way back when, after they had an incredible run in like the 2014 NCAA tournament or something like that. So I try to leave coaches' wives out of this, but Julie, if you're listening, we appreciate your support, and we look forward to seeing your husband's former school get trounced on Friday night. I'm going to go with Washington -2.5 for my best bet. I like the movement so far. Still have it under a field goal. Would advise rushing to get that before it hits 3. But if you're trying to save some juice, worst case scenario, it hits 3 and you push, you get your free movie. Like one of my NFL podcast co-hosts says, a free movie. You basically watch a game and you would have paid to go see something in the IMAX. And if you push on a 3-point Washington victory, of course, at Big East Ben and at the _G Warner, our picks will cover. But it's not the worst case scenario, and maybe you save some juice to spend somewhere else later in the day, week, night.
It's 2.5, Griffin. You can't push.
We cannot push, but I'm saying if you wait for 3. Anyway, our numbers are 2.5 and 6.5. Laying the points in this episode, looking for another green episode. Use that promo code CFB15, go for $15 off. All listeners of this college football podcast only. And we will see you next week on Tuesday night, posted probably in the wee hours for a lot of you on the East Coast. But we'll be out there, and we'll be back again soon. If you have anything you'd like to tell the people at Big East Ben before we get off and I guess shoot the moon and watch the rest of these Major League Baseball playoffs tonight.
Yeah, keep the hate coming on Twitter. Keeps us motivated.
Keep the hate. We embrace the hate. And we'll see what our algorithm can come up with for the next week. See you all next week. And thank you all for joining in. And this has been the Need for Screens College Football Podcast, presented by the pregame.com podcast network.